one of the things I think we ought to talk about is arbitration. It's kind of an often misunderstood part of the game. I think people need a little bit of a better understanding about it. And the reason I'm bringing it up right now is because Jock Peterson, I think today, it's Friday, Jock Peterson lost his arbitration hearing. Now, that puts the owners, the CEOs and owners, 3-0 so far this season. And we have a total of 15 players who are eligible for arbitration and have taken it all the way to an official third-party decision maker. So tell me, Brad, like, what do you understand about arbitration, and what gaps do you have in your understanding? And let's talk about it. Let's help people understand what it means.
So I actually feel like I have a pretty good understanding of arbitration, but it's only been because of this year, to be honest with you. And really what it is the team comes with their number they think the player is worth for the next year or two. The player comes with his number that he thinks he's worth for the next year or two. They go into a room. They argue their sides just like in a court case. And then the arbitrator picks one of those two numbers. He does not pick a number in the middle. It's not a negotiation. It is an arbitration. Right. So they pick one of those two numbers, and either they go with the player's number and the player wins, or they go with the team's number and the team wins, and that's the new contract for a year or two, depending on what they decide, what the arbitrator decides.
Yeah. So players are eligible to seek an arbitration hearing if they have 3 or more, but less than 6 years of major league service time, like actual service time. Yeah. Okay. And they're, as long as they're not already under a contract. So this comes up for guys who are just reaching that magical 6-year mark in their service time. That's when this starts to happen.
Well, and then after that 3rd year is when it starts to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So like guys like Chris Bryant would be an arbitration guy. George Springer was one a couple years ago. And before I really understood arbitration. He took a deal. I was like, oh, is that a market correction? No, it's just avoiding arbitration.
Yeah.
Is all it was.
Yeah, right. So here. Let me just explain to the people listening and watching. This is what happens in the barest bones terms. Like Brad said, the players come to the club and they say, I think I'm worth more. And the club says, I don't think so. And they argue, and the agents argue, and everybody's now like upset a little bit, And if they got to go all the way to an arbiter, if they've got to bring in a third party that really doesn't care, then what ends up happening is often described as a character assassination. Okay, I think Trevor Bauer, last season is the one that kind of described it as a character assassination. But the point is, you get in this room, kind of like mediation in a divorce. You get in this room and you start talking about all of the things that are wrong with the other side, right? So the team says, no, we don't think this player is worth this much because of this, this, and this. And it can be on the field, it can be off the field. It knows no bounds. So Trevor Bauer being the example again, his social media activity is very interesting. He has a history of being somewhat inflammatory. And what we ended up with in that arbitration hearing is that the ball club said, well, they brought that to light. They brought that to the negotiation table. We don't think that this increases your value. We actually think this decreases your value. He says, well, what does that matter? It's off the table. It's off the field. It shouldn't matter. And the club says, well, but it does, because it affects our brand and it affects your personal brand, which affects our brand, etc. So I remember when Derek Jeter, this is why I learned about arbitration because Derek Jeter went through arbitration, and he said, well, this is what I'm worth. This is what I have provided so far, and this is what I'm expected to provide. I'm still growing. I'm still developing. I'm still learning, etc. And the club said, no, I don't think so. Now, the club's motivation is to spend as little as possible and get as much as possible out of it, right? That's business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because to them, it's business. And to young players who don't, maybe not, but to some of them who are still living this sort of dreamscape idea of professional baseball, those uninitiated into the business side of it that's cold and calculated, I think they get their feelings hurt a lot. And I think that
I could see that.
How could you not, right? How could you not sit there in a room with the people arguing on about why you're so great, and then across the table, the people you're employed by who recruited you and tell you every day how great you are, all of a sudden coming to you and telling you all of the things they found that are wrong with you. And maybe for the first time ever that this is coming to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, so what ends up happening is you end up with an alienation. You end up with resentment. It damages the relationship between the ball club and the player. And then things can get really, really ugly. It happened with Derek Jeter. He stayed in New York, which was amazing, because he walked out of that arbitration hearing scarred. I've got his book right here. And he's
nice.
He was legitimately upset. I mean, rightly so. Because he plays for the most shrewd, often, not always, the most shrewd team there is financially. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just think that, so there are 15 guys up for arbitration right now. It happens every year. It's in February. The guys that take it that far, they have their hearings or cases or whatever heard in February every year. So far, the players are 0-3 against the teams. So Jock Peterson just lost his arbitration hearing with the Dodgers, which is interesting because he's up for trade right now. Then we got Jose Barrios with Minnesota Twins. He lost. And Shane Green lost his arbitration hearing to the Atlanta club. So anyway.
Yeah. And I feel like guys are usually going to lose their arbitration just because, like, unless they come out and they have monster seasons, right?
Sure.
Because I feel like at that point clubs and arbitrators are going to be like, well, no, you're still on that rookie deal, and you've still got stuff to live up to, you know? And there are a few guys who win, and I'm always surprised, honestly, when guys win their arbitration cases, because it rarely happens.
Yeah, I am too. But I'm always cheering for it. You know, I'm always like, yeah, because he's going in there with just him and his agent, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, it's just a very small team against a very large, well-established, very experienced team on the other side of the table. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's interesting. It affects baseball in a lot of ways. A lot of guys will avoid arbitration at all costs. Some teams will too, but you get like you get a guy who decides to keep the romance alive, I guess is the best way to say it, and he'll take a lowball deal in order to make sure that the relationship isn't damaged.
Yeah,
happens all the time.